All right. So first question, how do we get past a second date?
Great question. Great question. So how do we get past the second date? I guess, first and foremost, I want to thank the person who asked this, and I'm trying to think it. I mean, do we think this is a guy asking this or a girl? How do you want to tackle this? I mean,
I
because
forgot to
there's a
look.
lot here.
I forgot to look. Let's start with guy. And then if we
Let's
have
go
time,
with
we can
guy.
answer girl.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, because obviously we know that the challenge with answering these questions is that they're not. We don't know who the full context of the person who's asking them, and so I'm always happy to answer them, but always looking at this from an educational perspective and saying, okay, well, how do we kind of more or less globalize the question that's being asked, but still trying to make it. But sometimes it's hard without having the full context of knowing the person who's asking them. So we're doing the best that we can, but we thank you guys for asking the questions. But just always want to give that caveat out there. So I guess the question is, how do we get past the second date? And when I think about this question, you know, particularly for a gentleman, I guess the question is, well, what goes on, in those first two dates? Is it that there's difficulty in conversation? Is it that there is a difficulty in relating? Is it that you just don't feel that you're able to like, is it from your side feeling that you're not able to kind of move forward, or is it that like you get to two dates and then all of a sudden like it's like the girls are no longer interested? And so there's a lot of course, insecurity that would provoke in somebody, and I could understand that would be the question. But I guess what I'm saying is that what you could do is be yourself. All right, let's just start there. So be yourself. Go into these interviews. We're interviewing right now. Not dates aren't interviews.
It's not an
Gosh, it's
interview.
pretty. It's not an interview. It's not an interview. Like
That's
it's
why they're
not a
so
job interview
scared.
or performance.
Look, Dr.
But that's
Mario's
the
telling them
point.
it's
I
an
guess that's
interview.
what I'm trying to get to is that you feel maybe I'm projecting right now. But like it's like, but you feel like you have to kind of like perform or something. I get you got to put your best face forward, but at the same time, like you got to be able to be yourself. And you got to be able to talk about like what you like, who you are, without going too far into the emotional stuff. Just kind of at least feeling as comfortable as possible going into the dates. And that would be my best advice is to be comfortable, to reveal yourself, to have good conversation, and then just to see where it goes. If it is that they're just the dates themselves aren't like there isn't a connection, there isn't a jive, then certainly, maybe there's a question within yourself about how you're approaching the date. But it could also be, honestly, that maybe just haven't found somebody that you've connected with enough to be able to kind of merit a third date. And I know that might be a harder answer because that's less. We have less control over that. But
Mm.
I would say if that's the case, then like no harm, no foul. Like, and just keep trying until you're able to find somebody who you're able to drive with, connect with, and able to go, into that third date with. Um, so I guess that's my thinking if we're answering this as like a guy who's asking the question. But I guess I would ask you this question, Elizabeth, which would be like as a girl, what would you be looking for in those first couple dates, and what would prevent you from moving on to a third date with somebody?
Well, I had a couple thoughts. The first was this might seem kind of obvious, but I'm just going to tell you anyway, just in case it's not obvious. Please ask her on a third date if you want to go. Maybe there's
Oh yeah,
some
right.
like,
That's right.
like maybe there's some expectation that it's going to
Hmm.
be more mutual at a certain point, or I don't know, there's just a difference in understanding of what the process looks like. So if that's the case,
Hmm.
don't be afraid to like talk about the process. In counseling, we call it meta communication, communicating about
Oh,
communicating.
that's a big word.
And I think it's okay to communicate about communicating, do some meta communication in your discussion of how you want the dating relationship to look like. So if you're not asking on a third date, that would be the first thing I
Hmm.
would say.
Hmm.
The other two things I was thinking of are like, okay, so I know culturally speaking that there's this high expectation for intense physical intimacy pretty early on
Hmm.
in the dating
Right.
process, and even up into having sex, like first, second, third date, even totally sober. Like obviously if you're intoxicated and you sleep together on the first time you meet, that's one thing. If you're totally sober and you're deciding like this is the time we need to sleep together for data purposes. I don't know. There are like reasons why people make these choices. And so it's possible that you're not getting past those dates because you have differences in values and differences
Hmm.
in how you want to live out your moral compass. If that is the case, if some of that is playing into it, I would say maybe find a different pool of people to choose from. Like if you're going on dating apps in particular and you keep bumping up against this, or you go out to bars and you meet people and you keep bumping up against this, maybe try like something like Catholic Match, or maybe try a young adult group, or going to mass and meeting people there. So maybe it's part of the pool where you're meeting people isn't necessarily conducive to finding people with a similar value system. Or if you are interested in still continuing with the pool you're at, maybe making your intentions clear early on, like, I'm not having sex with you. And then then you wouldn't get past the first date, but there wouldn't be this awkwardness on like leading up to the third. So that was one of the things I was thinking about that might be an issue. The last thing I want to say about this is, what are you doing on those dates? Because I know that so when I kind of created this ministry for people discerning marriage, I sort of had myself and my friends in mind. Like, this is what I would have wanted when I was discerning marriage. But I will be the first to admit that my friends and I are, as a rule, kind of intense. Like, we knew we wanted to get married, and so we were we were intentionally going for it. And I think that there are other people who are spending their free time watching resources for discerning marriage and dating well and all that stuff, who may also be a little bit goal-oriented. Like, you may be focused on really wanting to know for sure. But the problem with that is it can lead to conversations that are too serious too fast, or like a relationship dynamic that is too intimate too fast. Not intimate in like the sexual sphere, or even like sinning. This is not a moral thing I'm talking about here. It's just, it may be too much, too heavy early on. So are you having fun on those dates? Like, that's part of what, like, yes, you need to be having some conversations, but also you need to be having fun and seeing if you guys can like be friends. So if your first 2 dates were very talk-based, or your first date was very talk-based, maybe add in some like bowling, or I don't know, pottery painting, or what do people do for fun? I have no idea. I have lots of little kids. I was thinking about going on a hike. I love hiking. But then I was like, does that lead in itself to like too intense conversation if all you're doing is looking at nature? I don't know. Listen, I have little kids, so all of these ideas sound really fun to me, but I don't know what single people who have all the freedom in the world want to do for fun. But anyway, find something fun to do. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe like it's just a little bit too heavy early on, and having a few dates sprinkled in near the beginning that are just fun. Like, you're just enjoying each other, and you're just, enjoying your surroundings, enjoying your environment. Becoming friends could be helpful.
I think that's a great idea. And I think those are great suggestions, because it could be that maybe the first 2 days were just, coffee and just chatting, which is fine, certainly. But you're 100% right that you have to think about, like, what are fun things to do? Going to a museum together, going to an art museum together, like going kayaking, going on a hike, doing bowling, any of the things that you just said, going and doing stuff that actually allows you space to not just talk about yourself, but gives you an opportunity to reveal yourself in these kind of little adventures or moments. When they talk about story writing and character writing, they always say, you have to show the audience, not tell the audience about this character. And so you write into the story or the screenplay, like what the character does and how they respond. And so that's how their personality gets revealed, rather than just giving a detailed play-by-play about who they are.
Nice.
So I firmly agree with what you're saying. I think it's a great suggestion that think about the dates, think about ways that you can just have fun with them, and then see if like that merits a third date. Now, I know the challenge is sometimes those things can get a little pricey, but that's okay. You just have to kind of just manage your budget on it. Like, you try to find the things that aren't as expensive.
Good call.